back to another video on my channel. Before we get into today's video, I do just want to say that I am aware that this video is going to be going up late. This day that I'm filming is actually Friday, but the reason that I know that this video is going to go up late is because I've been having a lot of issues, and I'm not sure if it's with my camera or my laptop, but something just keeps going wrong every single time I try and upload lately. So if this video is late, that is probably why, and I'm well aware of that, and I'm trying to get it all situated and sorted out so that I can upload more regularly. However, I have no idea what is going on. But anyways, today's video is another video that is kind of revolving around Halloween. All of my videos for October will be kind of Halloween themed, I guess. And yeah, so with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. The case that we are going to be talking about today is known as the Black Hope Horror, as well as the Black Hope Curse, the Black Hope Cemetery, and a few other names. This case all started in the early 1980s when Sam and Judith Haney had decided to purchase what appeared to be their dream home in Newport, Houston, Texas. Like I mentioned, the couple had said that this was basically their dream home, and the neighborhood that they had been moved into was absolutely beautiful. It was one of those neighborhoods where it appeared that everybody who lived on that general street really took care of their property. All of the lawns were very well manicured. The homes just looked immaculate because the people who lived in that area really loved their homes. And again, because of that, Sam and Judith were extremely excited to live there, and they had even said that this was in fact their dream home. Even though Sam and Judith were really happy with the house that they had just purchased, there was a few things that they wanted to do after moving into the home to really make it their own. And one of these things that they really wanted to do was adding a swimming pool in the backyard. So one day after they moved in, I believe it was only a couple weeks, they started to do construction in the backyard to install a swimming pool. Now, one day while this construction was going on, Sam Haney was home alone when all of a sudden there was a knock on the front door. When Sam opened the front door, there was a stranger standing there. This stranger was an elderly African-American man who introduced himself to Sam as Jasper Norton. Jasper had told Sam that he needed to stop the construction that was going on in his backyard because he was about to disturb two graves. Now, Sam was not sure what was going on. He had never been informed about there being graves anywhere near this area when he had purchased the house. The builders never told him anything like that. The real estate agent never told him anything like that. So he wasn't really sure if there was any truth to what this man was saying. He thought this man could be maybe mentally ill or playing some kind of sick joke on him. And so because of this, Jasper took Sam into the backyard and showed him exactly where these two graves would be found. And Sam then took it upon himself to dig these graves up. So, like I said, immediately after Norton had left the Haney home, Sam went into the backyard with his backhoe and he started to immediately dig in the area where Norton had said that there was graves. And a short while after he had started digging, that is when he had hit something. It had turned out that there was complete truth to everything that Norton had said, and there was two graves located in the Haney's backyard. Norton had told Sam that this was a 19th century burial ground for slaves that had been called the Black Hope Cemetery. Norton had went on to say that there was at least 60 unmarked graves in that area that had now been built over top of by these builders who built all of these immaculate homes. He said that the builders didn't want anybody, obviously, to know that these graves were there because that would be a very bad thing for sales, and so they just decided to keep this a secret. But again, like I said, Sam was digging and he did hit something, and it did turn out to be two pipe boxes that had two people's remains inside of it. After Sam had figured out that there actually was graves buried in his backyard, he became very worried, and so immediately he called police, and they came down to do a further investigation of these graves. While doing this, they were able to discover that both of the people who had been buried in the backyard were wearing matching wedding rings, and they were able to identify these people as Betty and Charles Thomas, who had passed away sometime during the Civil War. Now, like absolutely anybody would be, I would think, Judith was extremely traumatized by the fact that not only were there two people buried in her backyard, but she was traumatized by the fact that they had now dug up these people's graves. She wanted more information about what was happening, who these people were, and why they were buried in the backyard. So I think that they got into contact with Norton, who was able to tell her that he knew these graves were there because he helped dig them in the 1930s. He said that Betty and Charles were some of the last people to have passed away and been buried in this grave area, and that was really all that he could tell her. He told her that they were married, and that was pretty much all that he knew. Judith felt really bad about this, and so did Sam, and so they decided that the best idea would be to rebury Charles and Betty in the exact spot that they had dug them back up from, and kind of try and give them a good burial, and then hopefully they could rest in peace. Judith even went ahead and planted very beautiful flowers on top of where the graves were buried, just to kind of symbolize that there were people buried there because they couldn't give them a gravestone. You'd think that finding two people buried in your backyard would be absolutely horrifying, which I'm sure that it was, but Sam and Judith said that the real horror started to take place after they had put Charles and Betty back in the ground. One night while the couple was in bed, I don't know if they were sleeping or reading or what they were doing, they were brought to the attention that one of the clocks that was in the bedroom was now sparking and making this weird noise, and they said that it almost appeared as if it was glowing blue. They had to take the clock off the wall for fear that it was going to start a fire, and that is when they realized that this clock that looked like it was having some kind of electrical issue wasn't even plugged in. On another night when Judith was home alone, she could distinctively hear what she thought was the back door sliding open and then sliding shut. She also thought that she could distinctly hear Sam say, "What are you doing?" And then she thought she heard the sliding door open and close again. But when she went to investigate what was going on, that is when she found that the sliding door was completely locked, it was undisturbed, it hadn't been open, and Sam was still out doing whatever he was doing, and she was still home alone, despite whatever she had just heard. And so because of this, she really started to think that maybe she was going crazy and thought that her mind was playing tricks on her. Sam had eventually came home that night, and Judith had told him about what she had just gone through, and he thought that maybe she was just absolutely exhausted, and that is why she was maybe hearing things. After they kind of went through this, the two of them went to bed, and when they woke up the next morning, they started to get dressed because they had planned on going out for the day. But after Judith started getting dressed, that is when she noticed that the shoes that she was planning on wearing that day were completely missing. Now this alone doesn't seem too strange, people lose things all the time, but Judith and Sam had searched the entire house and they could not find these shoes anywhere. And so because of that, Judith just decided to wear a different pair of shoes on that day, and they just went about whatever they were doing and didn't really think too much of it. Several hours later, after the couple had already gone out for the day, they had come home and Sam was now doing work in the backyard. He was in the backyard minding his own business when all of a sudden something caught his eye. The shoes that Judith had been looking for all morning and that they completely searched the entire house for were sitting in the backyard, side by side, as if they had been placed where they were sitting absolutely perfectly. And to make this stranger, where they were sitting was directly on top of where Betty and Charles had been buried. It had also turned out that it was Betty Thomas's birthday on that day, and so after talking between Sam and Judith, they decided that it was almost as if Charles was giving Betty these shoes as a birthday gift. It had turned out that Sam and Judith weren't the only ones in this neighborhood experiencing strange things after these graves had been discovered. Many other people who lived in that neighborhood started reporting strange things happening within their homes that all appeared to be of paranormal nature. The activity in Sam and Judith's home just continued to worsen and worsen, so much to the point that the couple wanted to move. They didn't want to live in that house anymore. But unfortunately, they had spent all of their money moving into this house and they just didn't have the funds to do so. But they did decide that they wanted to sue the builders of the home because they were not informed that their home was built on top of a cemetery. However, they did end up losing this court case and they had to file for bankruptcy because they owed over $50,000 in court costs. And somewhere after all of this, they did end up being able to move out of their home anyway, but the whole buildup just really seemed unfair because it wasn't their fault that they had been not informed about the fact that their home had been built on a cemetery. Like I said, Sam and Judith were not the only people who were experiencing these kinds of horrors within their home. Ben and Jean Williams, similar to Sam and Judith, thought that they had found their absolute dream home when they moved into this specific neighborhood. Loved gardening, and after they moved into this house, she wanted to make their backyard and their front yard even absolutely beautiful. She wanted to fill everything with flowers. But something very strange was happening. Every single time that Jean would plant flowers in the flower beds and in the gardens, they would almost immediately die. The first few times this had happened, she thought that she was doing something wrong, so she dug the flowers back up and replanted new ones. But this just continued to happen every single time without any explanation as to why. The Williams had also reported that after moving into their home, they started to realize that there were several sinkholes in their backyard that appeared to be in the shape of coffins. Now, this didn't really alarm them too much at first because they had no idea that their homes were said to have been built on cemeteries, so they just kept refilling these sinkholes and then they would appear again. Similar to the flowers, every time the sinkholes would appear, they would refill them, it would last a couple days, and then a sinkhole would appear in the exact same spot just a few days later. The Williams would later say that despite this being their dream home, almost immediately after moving in, they could feel this really dark presence just in their home at all times. They said that on many occasions they would see these shadowy figures moving through the house when nobody was even in the house besides them, or it was one of them home alone, and then they would see these shadowy figures with no explanation. They also said they were often woken up in the middle of the night to this really horrible putrid smell that they couldn't explain, and that just wouldn't go away for several hours, and then it would vanish and it wouldn't come back until later on, again very, very late in the evening. Shortly after moving into this home, Ben and Jean's granddaughter Carly would move in with them, and she would say that this house was like living in a haunted house that was set up for Halloween. She said that randomly all year round you would just be walking around the house and all of a sudden you would hit these cold patches, and once you hit the cold patches you would just be overtaken with a feeling of dread. She also said that she was extremely scared to be in the home alone because it was very evident to her that there was a super unhappy spirit living with them inside of their house. She said that you could hear constant whispering as if somebody was in the home when in fact she was home by herself. She also said that the toilets would flush on their own, the lights would flicker, and that the house itself just really, really felt super unsettling. And it was, again, very obvious that they were not living in this house alone and that a spirit was living in there with them. Whether that be one or several is something that they weren't even aware of, and we still are not aware of to this day. On one particular night, Ben had been out pretty late, and when he got home, Jean was already in bed. He said that when he walked into the home, he was taken aback because he saw not one, but two very shadowy, dark figures kind of just standing near their bedroom. And as soon as Ben noticed these dark creatures, these shadow people, they started to move towards the bedroom where Jean was sleeping. He just felt like in his heart they were going to do something bad to his wife, and he said that it was pretty much fight or flight, and he kind of lost the feeling of fear and just wanted to stop these things from doing anything bad to his wife. So he immediately ran straight through them, and he said that when he did this, the shadow creatures just kind of disappeared. But after he did this, he was left with this really sticky feeling all over his entire body. Ben and Jean had actually considered seeking legal help because they didn't know what to do and they really didn't want to live in this house anymore. They weren't happy living there and they wanted all of this paranormal activity to stop, but they were advised against doing that because there was absolutely zero proof that the Williams family was built on a graveyard. Not knowing what else to do, but desperately wanting to be able to move out of this house, Gina decided to take it upon herself to start digging in her backyard in hopes that she could find some proof that her house had been buried on a graveyard, just similar to her neighbors, the Hanneys. And so she got a shovel and she went into her backyard and she started digging, but shortly after starting to dig, she started to feel very ill, and so because of this, her daughter Tina had come over and decided to help her mother dig in the backyard. However, shortly after digging in the backyard, Tina also would become very ill. However, her condition worsened much, much quicker than Jean's. She had gotten so disoriented while feeling ill that she had even started to talk nonsense and had began begging Jean and Ben to take good care of her children. Tina eventually was rushed to the hospital, and it had turned out that she had had a heart attack, and sadly, she ended up passing away. But the family did chalk this up to having some kind of paranormal involvement, because it did seem strange that Tina was in great fitness. She was very, very healthy, and all of a sudden she just had a heart attack while doing the least energetic thing while digging. She wasn't like really going overboard or anything like that. So the family did chalk this up to something paranormal within the home. The Williams family, after this tragedy, was able to pack up their lives and move to a completely different neighborhood that was completely paranormal free. They started their lives over, but unfortunately they did end up taking the burden and the tragedy of losing their daughter Tina at this house with them. Since these two families have reported these horrible stories that had taken place within their homes, no other residents have come forward with any paranormal activity taking place. However, that doesn't mean that it's not happening. Maybe they just aren't reporting on it, or maybe it isn't as severe. Or, you know, if they weren't by the house that dug up the grave, maybe the ghosts are settled and they don't feel like bothering these people. There are several other reasons why many residents could not be experiencing this paranormal activity and why these two families did. There are several reasons why that could be that don't always include that these families were not telling the truth or anything like that. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!